For years, Anjelica Huston was seen as the definition of class and power, but behind that dazzling image was a world of heartbreak she kept hidden for decades. Behind the red carpets and flashing cameras were deep wounds, family betrayals that cut like knives, relationships that fell apart in silence, and a devastating medical diagnosis that shattered her hopes of ever becoming a mother. She also battled unspoken tensions in Hollywood's elite circles, from a quiet but real clash with Oprah Winfrey to a rocky past with Bill Murray. And now, at 74, Anjelica Huston is finally opening up, and what she's revealing is shaking everything people thought they knew about her life. Anjelica Huston was born on July 8, 1951, to iconic film director John Huston and world-class ballerina Enrica Soma.
I didn't mean for it to be so public so fast, but I went on a show yesterday, and I was determined not to reveal that, in fact, I'm a very recent giver-upper. And
her childhood looked glamorous from the outside: fame, luxury, art, but inside it was cold and distant. From the moment she entered the world, she was surrounded by chaos. Her father wasn't even there when she was born. He was thousands of miles away in Uganda, deep in a movie shoot, completely absorbed in his work. When the news of her birth finally reached him days later, his reaction was shockingly indifferent, almost emotionless. That emotional distance didn't just fade away, it became a pattern that haunted Anjelica's childhood, shaping how she understood love and loyalty. And before she even turned 1, her mother faced a painful betrayal. John Huston refused to give Enrica a role in Moulin Rouge, a decision that would change everything for their family.
I don't know. I don't like surgery. I don't like pain. I don't like looking like somebody else. So as long as you know, I can get away with looking like myself.
Yeah.
But John Huston didn't just cast someone else. He fell into an affair with her. His long absences and constant infidelities tore the family apart, leaving emotional wreckage everywhere he went. In 1960, Enrica Soma packed up little Anjelica and her brother Tony, moving them from Ireland to London in hopes of starting over. But peace didn't come easy. The damage was already deep. While John kept chasing women across continents, Soma found herself entangled with a married man. That affair led to the birth of another daughter, Allegra. Despite the drama, young Anjelica adored her baby sister, building a fierce, protective bond that would later face heartbreaking tests life threw her way.
Well, oddly enough, I went to a new doctor kind of shortly after I did my first episode of Huff, and she reminded me a lot of Dr. Lena, even though she wasn't a psychiatrist. A rather passive-aggressive psychiatrist, but it looks by that.
Then came an unexpected twist. A film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet was searching for its Juliet, and scouts came right to her school. For a moment, it looked like fate was opening the door to Anjelica's big break. But just as her dreams flickered to life, her father stepped in and shut them down. He declared that if Anjelica was going to act, it would only be in one of his films, under his control, his direction, his rules. That decision pushed her into A Walk with Love and Death in 1969, a role that turned into a haunting chapter of her life. Working beside her father wasn't the dream she imagined. It was emotionally exhausting, filled with pressure and criticism. And when the film hit theaters, critics tore it apart. Disillusioned and lost, Anjelica drifted through her school years, skipping classes and chasing distractions, while her mother, Enrica Soma, struggled in silence, broken by the collapse of her own life. Then came the night that shattered Anjelica's world into pieces. She was jolted awake by a family friend delivering news too devastating to believe. Her mother, Enrica Soma, had died in a car crash in France. She was only 39. The loss hit Anjelica like a storm, leaving her numb and searching for meaning. Heartbroken and lost, she moved to New York, hoping a new chapter could somehow help her heal. Almost immediately, Harper's Bazaar came calling. They wanted her for a high-profile photo shoot tied to the release of her first film. The shoot paired her with the genius yet dangerously unstable photographer Bob Richardson, a man whose brilliance came with deep darkness. He pulled her into his world fast, wrapping her in promises of love, safety, and escape, but behind that charm was chaos she couldn't yet see. Without her mother's steady love to guide her, Anjelica fell into the gravitational pull of Bob's obsession. At first, his attention felt comforting, even protective, but soon the cracks began to show. He was 42, she was barely 18, and their connection mirrored the same painful imbalance she'd seen between her parents. Richardson was battling addiction, had been institutionalized, and carried scars from a marriage that had imploded under its own drama and excess. What first looked like passion slowly twisted into control. And while critics tore apart her first film, the world started paying attention. Her striking looks and quiet strength drew modeling and acting offers her way. Yet as her independence grew stronger, the tension at home grew louder, and the truth of their toxic relationship could no longer stay hidden. Bob Richardson's dark side exploded in terrifying ways. One night, after Anjelica left briefly for a simple TV appearance, she returned to find pure destruction. He had smashed and torn apart everything she owned in their hotel room, furious over something as trivial as a couple of unopened suitcases. That rage was the warning sign she couldn't ignore. The final breaking point came during a tense trip to Mexico with her father, John Huston, and his new fiancée, Cece. One night, after Anjelica quietly shared a drink with her dad, Richardson snapped again. He hurled a bottle straight at her in a fit of jealousy and rage. When she returned home, the message couldn't have been any clearer. It was time to walk away for good. Back in Los Angeles, Anjelica finally ended the 3-year nightmare. She escaped to Cece's peaceful home in the Pacific Palisades, surrounded by horses, open air, and long, healing silences. It was the first time in years she could actually breathe. She turned down all the awkward matchmaking attempts until one day an invitation arrived at a party hosted by a magnetic rising star named Jack Nicholson. Still emotionally bruised, she hesitated, but curiosity pulled her in. What started as a spark quickly turned into something more, though their relationship was shaky from the very beginning. Both were climbing fast in Hollywood, which meant constant distance. She was in London for work, while he filmed somewhere else. Then came the gut punch. Just days after she left, a so-called friend confessed she had slept with Jack only hours after her departure. Jack tried to smooth it over with words, but the damage was done. Trust had cracked. And as time went on, her suspicions were always proven right. Jack didn't bother to hide his affairs, and yet through all the pain and betrayal, Anjelica stayed, holding on to love that kept breaking her heart. Anjelica felt the call to act again. The stage was in her blood, but fear still held her back. She didn't want to ride on her father's name or his fame. She wanted to earn it herself, even while sharing her life with one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Jack Nicholson. But by 1976, their relationship had cracked wide open. Jack was off in New York, laughing it up with friends, while Anjelica stayed in Los Angeles, drifting from one party to another, lost in a haze of emotions she couldn't quite untangle.
At one of those parties, fate threw someone new in her path, Ryan O'Neal. He was intense, magnetic, and clearly battling his own demons. Their connection was fast, fiery, and dangerously confusing. When Jack returned home days later, Anjelica shocked him and herself with a confession she could barely explain. She told him she thought she was in love with Ryan O'Neal and that she was leaving. Around that same time, she decided to reclaim her dream and step back into acting, determined to make it on her own terms. She auditioned for The Last Tycoon, hoping for a real chance to prove herself. But instead, she was met with humiliation. Director Elia Kazan dismissed her cruelly, saying she lacked the beauty for the part she wanted, offering her a smaller, throwaway role instead. Swallowing her pride, she accepted. The film's ensemble included none other than Jack Nicholson himself, blurring her personal and professional worlds even more. Her life quickly spiraled into chaos. Her new relationship with Ryan O'Neal turned into a living nightmare. She would later say it was like living with two people in one body. One minute he was charming and affectionate, the next explosive and cruel. The violence grew worse until one horrifying night it boiled over. At a party, enraged because he couldn't find her, Ryan lashed out and hit her, right there in front of people. Terrified, Anjelica ran upstairs and locked herself in a bathroom, but he followed, pounding on the door, continuing his assault. It was a moment that left scars she would carry for years. With no real adult to turn to for help, Anjelica found herself searching for guidance in the most unexpected place, her 13-year-old half-sister, Allegra. And what Allegra told her was simple but devastating: leave. That one word cut through all the confusion and fear like a blade. Still shaken from the chaos and disappointment that followed The Last Tycoon, Anjelica walked away from acting altogether, disappearing from film for 5 long years. But fate had more in store. Director Bob Rafelson reached out with an offer, a role in The Postman Always Rings Twice, starring opposite her ex, Jack Nicholson, and rising star Jessica Lange. She accepted, partly for the opportunity and partly because of the tangled emotions that still tied her to Jack. Yet deep down, she couldn't shake the uneasy thought that maybe her Hollywood doors had opened because of who she knew, not what she could do. Before she could reflect too deeply, tragedy struck again. A horrific car accident sent her crashing through the windshield. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The impact was brutal, and surgery was needed to repair her face. The pain was excruciating, but the realization that came afterward hurt even more. She had spent most of her life waiting for others to define her. Now, nearing her 30s, something inside her finally changed. She stopped chasing love through family, through men, through broken promises, and instead began chasing herself. She studied, took small acting gigs, and survived without leaning on any famous last name. Then came an offer that would change everything: Prizzy's Honor. The setup was intense. Her co-star would be Jack Nicholson, and her director, her father, John Huston. At first, she refused, wary of reopening old wounds, but she eventually said yes, only to be slapped with insults during contract talks. Executives told her she had no real talent and was only there because of who she surrounded. Once upon a time, those words would have shattered her, but not anymore. This time, those cruel words didn't break Anjelica Huston. They lit a fire inside her. She refused to back down or play small ever again. On the set of Prizzy's Honor, she gave everything she had, determined to prove she truly belonged in Hollywood, not because of her name, not because of Jack, but because of her own power and talent. When award season rolled around, Prizzy's Honor scored 8 Academy Award nominations, and when the winners were announced, only one took home the golden statue: Anjelica Huston. When her name was called, the world stopped for a second. It didn't even feel real. Instead of running toward the cameras or the flashing lights, she ran straight to her father, John Huston. Tears filled his eyes as she wrapped her arms around him, thanking him not as her director, but as her father, maybe for the first time in her life. That Oscar wasn't just a trophy, it was proof that she had finally made it on her own terms. In the years that followed, John Huston poured what strength he had left into his final film, The Dead, determined to make it a family legacy. Anjelica's brother, Tony, had written the script, and despite their father's frail health, with oxygen tanks always close by, the entire cast and crew rallied to make his vision come alive. But watching him direct while fading before her eyes broke something inside Anjelica. The stress left her drained, sick, and emotionally raw. Not long after The Dead was finished, John's condition worsened. Anjelica visited him every day in the hospital, clinging to routine and hope that he'd somehow pull through. One night, she kissed him goodbye, promising to be back in the morning. But when she returned the next day, he was gone. He was 81. Though their early years had been filled with distance, in the end they had found closeness, which made losing him all the more devastating. As the decade came to an end, Anjelica Huston's long and stormy relationship with Jack Nicholson finally fizzled out, this time for good. After years of emotional highs and crushing lows, she quietly walked away, ready to breathe on her own again. By 1990, looking for peace and perspective, she traveled to Cannes as a festival juror, and of course, the spotlight followed her wherever she went. Among the flashing cameras and whispers, she found herself on an unexpected date with none other than Prince Albert of Monaco. It was glamorous, charming, and straight out of a romantic movie, but like most fairy tales, it was fleeting. The real turning point came later through a quiet introduction from a friend to sculptor Robert Graham. Unlike the chaos of her past, Robert brought calm, stability, and a kind of love she had never known before. With him, Anjelica finally stepped into a peaceful kind of happiness, one that felt real, steady, and safe. At the same time, her career began to bloom again. Producers approached her with a dream role, one she had secretly imagined since she was a little girl. Growing up, she had adored the Addams Family cartoons, always picturing herself as the mysterious and elegant Morticia. And now, that fantasy was becoming real. But bringing Morticia Addams to life wasn't easy. Behind the graceful look was pure endurance. The corsets were cinched so tight she couldn't even sit in a car. Her makeup routine was brutal too. Fabric tabs were glued to her face and taped behind her head to stretch her skin, leaving her with pounding headaches and painful rashes. It was exhausting, punishing work, but it all paid off spectacularly. The Addams Family became a massive worldwide hit, turning Morticia into an icon and etching Anjelica Huston's name forever into pop culture history. Away from the flashing lights and red carpets, love quietly grew stronger for Anjelica Huston. During a heartfelt trip to Ireland to visit her childhood home, Robert Graham surprised her with something she never expected, a proposal. They married in 1992, and for the first time in her life, Anjelica felt she had found something real, something that could truly last. But even in that joy, there was a quiet emptiness she couldn't ignore, one that had followed her for years. Motherhood had never been a big focus before. Her past relationships had been too unstable, too full of heartbreak and chaos. But after walking away from Jack Nicholson's world, Anjelica finally allowed herself to face the question she had always avoided. Could she ever have children? The answer came in the most painful way imaginable.
Doctors diagnosed her with endometriosis and told her the chances of becoming a mother were extremely unlikely. The words hit like a punch to the chest. She described feeling waves of anger, sadness, and deep inadequacy, emotions she carried quietly, never showing them to the public. Together, she and Robert tried fertility treatments, clinging to hope, but the outcome never changed. It became a silent grief that lived inside her, even as she continued to move forward with grace and determination. But out of that pain came strength. Finally free from the heavy shadows of her father's legend and Jack Nicholson's fame, the 1990s turned into a golden era for Anjelica. She worked non-stop across film and television and even stepped confidently behind the camera as a director. Without even trying, she had become the very kind of effortless Hollywood icon she grew up surrounded by. Her unforgettable role in the Royal Tenenbaums sealed her status. Critics praised her performance, calling it one of her finest yet. But working on the Royal Tenenbaums wasn't the dreamy Hollywood experience people imagined. Behind the camera, the vibe was tense and awkward. Anjelica later opened up about how veteran actor Gene Hackman's temper created a hostile atmosphere on set, especially toward the young director, Wes Anderson. The tension got so bad that she and Bill Murray often had to step in to protect Wes. Murray even showed up on his days off just to keep things from spiraling out of control. That chaotic set might have bonded them at first, but the friendship didn't survive. When Anjelica and Bill reunited years later for The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, things had changed completely. The warmth was gone. Bill was cold, distant, and flat-out dismissive. He even excluded her from a cast dinner early in the shoot. It was a painful reminder that in Hollywood, relationships can shift fast and without warning. But that wasn't the only strain hanging over her career. In later years, Anjelica found herself on the quiet, overlooked side of fame, and she couldn't quite understand why. She's hinted that part of the tension may have started after her Oscar win. The award that had once been her ultimate validation also stirred unexpected resentment.
Her win for Prizzi's honor had placed her ahead of Oprah Winfrey's acclaimed performance in The Color Purple, and according to Anjelica, Oprah never forgave that loss. From that moment on, she felt a cold distance, whether imagined or real, that left her questioning who truly celebrated her success. And just as she thought she'd finally built her fairy tale ending with sculptor Robert Graham, her safe haven from all the Hollywood storms, tragedy struck again. In 2007, Robert fell seriously ill. Within just 6 months, he was gone. The man who had brought her peace and stability was suddenly taken from her, leaving Anjelica once again standing in the ruins of love and loss, heartbreak that even time couldn't fully mend. The loss of Robert Graham completely shattered Anjelica Huston's heart. After his passing, she never sought another romantic relationship again, choosing instead to live with the love she had already experienced. It wasn't loneliness, it was devotion. Her healing came slowly through her art and deep self-reflection. She poured her energy into her craft, taking on projects like the hit TV series Smash, and later into writing, opening up her soul through 2 powerful memoirs that revealed the raw truth behind her glamorous life. In those pages, she didn't just write about her love for Robert, she explored the deep fractures left by her childhood, the pain, and the resilience that defined her journey. Over time, she made peace with her father's memory, understanding the man behind the legend. But there was one wound that took much longer to heal. John Huston's many affairs had always been whispered about, but one cut deeper than any other. He began a relationship with Anjelica's teenage friend, Zoe Salas. And in a moment that felt cruelly public, John revealed the truth by announcing the birth of a son. That child was Danny Huston, who, in time, would grow into a talented actor and a cherished part of Anjelica's family. But acceptance didn't come easy. For years, she wrestled with hurt and betrayal before she finally found forgiveness. It wasn't quick or simple. It was earned through love, loss, and the kind of strength that only comes from surviving it all. Anjelica Huston's story isn't just about fame, it's about fighting through pain, finding peace in solitude, and turning heartbreak into legacy. If you were moved by her incredible journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment below to keep her story alive.